Hi, everyone, and welcome to Live with the 19th, a brand new virtual event series that gives you a front row seat to conversations with women on the front lines of politics and public policy. I'm Emily Ramshaw, the co-founder and CEO of The 19th, a nonprofit, nonpartisan news platform launching late this summer at the intersection of gender, politics, and policy. Events like this one aren't possible without the support of the 19th sponsors. Thanks so much to Bumble, a connections app designed to help you make meaningful connections in love, life, and work. Download Bumble now to start making virtual connections in all aspects of your life. I just want to note that while donors and sponsors generously support our programming, they do not play any role in selecting the topics, the speakers, or the line of questioning. Now I'd like to introduce this interview between the 19th's Washington correspondent, Amanda Becker, and GOP Chair Ronna McDaniel. Thank you both for joining us, and Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Before we get started, just a couple notes of housekeeping. We would love it if you share the 19th with your friends. During this conversation, you can ask questions by tweeting using the hashtag the19thlive or leaving a comment on our Facebook page. And be sure to get notified about future events by visiting 19thnews.org/subscribe. And now that that's taken care of, I'm thrilled to welcome GOP Chair Ronna McDaniel to have this conversation today with us. She is the second woman to hold that post. She's been the chair of the party since 2017. She has presided over a period of prolific fundraising for the president's re-election campaign. And welcome, Chair McDaniel.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be with you.
Thank you. I wanted to actually start out with a question from one of our viewers. And this is Melissa from Rocky River, Ohio. And she wanted to know, in your experience, what has been the most persuasive message to get more women involved in the political process, kind of just from a nonpartisan standpoint?
Well, hi, Melissa from Rocky River. My first home was in Cleveland, Ohio, in Avon Lake. So I know Rocky River well. Thank you for that question. Listen, I think it is really hard sometimes to get women to run for office for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we're not one monolithic group, but when I was Michigan chair, it was something I looked at a lot as how do I get women to run? And there were issues that I came up across a lot. One was balance, family balance. Two was just the nature of politics right now. I think especially in this day and age, it's pretty divisive and can be vitriolic, and not everybody wants to subject themselves to that. And then I'd say three, the most difficult hurdle that women found, and it's certainly I've dealt with this, is fundraising. You know, it depends on where you're coming from. When I started in politics as Michigan chair, I had been a stay-at-home mom. I didn't have a network of guys that I went golfing with or people that I knew in the business community. So actually building that group, that network to actually raise money from was much harder. So the two things I would say for women is we have to get involved. Our voices matter. We care about school. We make the majority of the healthcare decisions. We will have no voice if we don't get involved on either party. But the second is we need to support women candidates financially. Other women need to support women financial candidates that way. And then for other women, lean in, push hard, take the leap, because it's so critical that we have our voices heard in so many areas of government, local to the federal level.
Thank you. And something you and I talked about when we spoke earlier this week was kind of what you've been doing to encourage Republican women to get involved. In 2018, we saw this kind of historic influx of women to the House of Representatives. There were 36 new women. Only one of them was a Republican. You did see some success on other fronts. There's Kristi Noem, who was elected the first woman governor of South Dakota. Marsha Blackburn was Tennessee's first woman senator elected in that year. What do you think happened that year, and what systems have you put in place since as a party to encourage women and help women through your primary process and to get them on ballots in November?
Yeah, so it is a little different as RNC chair because I'm not part of the recruitment effort. So, but I do think Kevin McCarthy and the House recognized we did not have enough recruitment of women. And when I say recruit, it's not just, hey, come run for office. It's how are we going to support you as you run for office? And how are we going to make sure we give you the resources and the tools to feel like a candidate that we're actually behind? And as you mentioned on the Senate side, we did add senators in 20 2018. Marshall Blackburn's one, but also Martha McSally was appointed. You also have Chrissy Hyde-Smith, who's from Mississippi. So we had some improvement on that side. But I think going forward, we've recruited 220 women to run for the House this year. Elise Stefanik has been key on that. We do have good leaders on the House side, Liz Cheney, Elise, many, many others. And then Elise started a PAC that specifically helps women candidates. And then I think one of the most vital things we did as a party is we found a component that matched Act Blue, which is this small dollar fundraising vehicle for Democrat candidates, which really allows lesser known candidates to conduit or work with, candidates have better name ID to raise money. And we now have Win Red. And that is going to be one of the best tools we can provide to women candidates who are starting out to raise those funds to be successful.
And I wanted to talk about 4 House races in 2 different states that I don't think people consider traditional Republican strongholds, New York and California. And there's 4 women in really interesting races in these states. And we'll start with California because they've already had their primary. We know who's going to be on the ballot in November. Young Kim and Michelle Steele, they are in districts between LA and Orange County, kind of south of the Los Angeles area. Young Kim's district right now is it's polling about even. Steele's is actually showing a slight edge for Republicans. What do you think is it about these candidates or that area of the country that kind of makes those really compelling candidates for people right now?
I think, and this may be outside of the norm, but I think people aren't always as involved in the party affiliation as do I connect with this candidate. And if you have a really good candidate, you can succeed in districts that are on the margin. Obviously, if you're in a 60 plus Republican seat, we have one of those in Texas right now. Democrats probably not going to win that seat, and there's seats like that. But one of the things I felt really strongly coming out of 2018 was candidates matter. And if the candidate understands the district, reflects the district, has a way to connect, works hard to earn every vote, you can win a seat. And Young Kim, being the first Korean woman to serve in the state Senate in California, she did phenomenally well in 2018. She actually was winning until weeks later. Michelle Steele, very similar. From a party standpoint, we are translating our press releases and our engagement in those communities into Korean or Vietnamese or Mandarin because we want to communicate with everybody in the district. But candidates matter. I always say this, I'm the party chair. I can build the road. The candidates all have to drive on my road of data, infrastructure, get out the vote, absentee chase. But not all candidates are created equal. I'm from Michigan. Not all cars are made in Detroit. And you need a good car and a good road to win an election. And we have recruited phenomenal candidates in Young Kim and Michelle Steele.
And then the other races in New York, one is in the Staten Island area, and that's Nicole Malliotakis. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Nicole Malliotakis, yep.
Yeah, she's in Staten Island. And then there's Claudia Tenney, kind of in an upstate district. Those are also both districts currently held by Democratic freshmen in the House, where it's looking like there are positive signs for the Republican candidates in those districts this year. And is it a similar dynamic to what's happening in California in that people are just responding to the strength of the candidates that have been recruited, or is there demographic shifts happening, or what do you think is going on in New York?
So I think it's a little different for both of those races in New York. Claudia is in a race in New York where the president won that district. It's 30 Democrats, maybe it's 29 now, that are sitting in districts where President Trump won in 2016. We saw about 8 million of those Trump voters who came out in 2016 sat out in 2018. So Claudia lost that seat in 2018. So she will benefit from actually having the president on the ballot and helping to lift that ticket. Plus, she's a great candidate and she's working incredibly hard. And then Nicole Malliotakis, she's Cuban and Greek. She knows the district well. She's part of the state assembly. So having that base name ID, a lot of women candidates do come from serving in state house or other positions. You see a lot of men that go from business and then they just run for office. We know this happens. Women do traditionally go from a county clerk to a state rep to secretary of state to Congress. We are more linear in how we run for office. So being a state assembly member helps give her that base of name ID, understanding the district, and again, being a very strong candidate.
So I wanted to also talk a little bit about women voters as a block. There was a fairly large gender gap in 2018 in terms of who women supported. 59% of women voted for the Democratic House candidate, 40% voted for the Republican House candidate. That was about double the difference in 2016 and was kind of viewed as this referendum on President Donald Trump. What are you doing to kind of reach out to those women, to bring them back, the ones that switched between 2016 and 2018? What programs are you putting in place as a party, and how are you having those conversations with women?
Well, you're right that we did see the data that showed suburban women went down for us in 2018. We had less support from that voting block. We did see an increase with rural women. We're not just one block. We all know that women, we don't vote all on the same issues. We're whole voters. We're over half of the electorate. So it is specific to the district and where we're engaging. So one, we've done a lot of focus groups in these suburban areas. We've looked at what are the issues for women in suburban Philadelphia, suburban Detroit, where I live, other areas where we saw, an erosion of our support. I'm not going to give all my secrets, but we've definitely found there are ways that we can move those votes because they were with us. They're called downshifters. They were with us, they left, and they're easier to get back. Overwhelmingly, an issue that we're seeing resonate right now with the crisis we're in with coronavirus is the economy. A lot of voters are saying we need to build the economy back as much as we're dealing with the healthcare issue. When you have 30 million people unemployed, we had a president who had done phenomenal things for women. We were at 66-year low in unemployment. Over half of the jobs that have been created under President Trump, over the 7 million jobs, had gone to women. He'd passed the historic paid leave for federal workers, things that we had never seen. So women were thriving under President Trump. So taking those facts to them and then making the case, he's going to be the one to build it back because he's done it once. Joe Biden's never had a job outside of Washington. He's never started a business. He's never held a job outside of the DC bureaucracy. He's just not going to have the skill set. Those are the types of things that are resonating. But part of the strength of the RNC is we treat every voter as an individual. I don't look at women as one block. We think very differently. We all have different reasons why we're running. We care about healthcare, education, the military. I mean, on every single issue. So our data, the investment we have made in data that allows us to customize our engagement with each voter is really the key to helping us be successful and turning those voters out.
Talked about earlier this week was the strength of the power of women's relationships and how you see that as a part of the political process and talking to some of these women voters. And I was wondering if you could describe for our viewers what we talked about earlier this week in terms of, women talking to the other women in their lives about politics and how, you might support the president, but know that your friends don't, and, how women are able to have those conversations.
Yeah, so we did launch, Women for Trump, and we're doing a lot of these webinars, or I don't know the right word, but these online podcasts every night. And we've seen a lot of engagement when we talk about issues that face women. But I've always believed, and I think it's true, the way you change somebody's mind when you're in an election is really that person-to-person contact. And we don't usually change somebody's mind by getting in their face and yelling at them. That's not how it's going to work. But when I talk to my girlfriends, I'm in suburban Detroit, they can all support the president. But when I share facts and I talk about it in a reasonable way, I have the ability to influence, and we listen to each other. And the best validator for a lot of voters is somebody they trust. And those relationships we build as women really are impactful because we rely on each other and we listen to each other. And, I'm worried about school right now with my kids and what's going on. And I'm going to be talking to my friends about that. And then we'll go into politics. And if it gets too heated, usually we walk away from it. But that's how society works. And from an RNC perspective, that's the value of us engaging our voters, our volunteers. So we've added 300,000 volunteers just during this pandemic. We're at over 1,000,001 volunteers engaged. Many of them are women. And what we're arming them with is this ability to go out and have these one-on-one conversations with the people they influence in their lives.
Do you think that's a difference? Do you think that women talk about politics and issues with their friends in a different way than men might?
Yeah, I can only speak about that anecdotally. Like I have a sister who's a really devout Democrat, and we don't talk about politics. We don't. It's off the table for us. We love each other. We talk about other things, but with my girlfriends, when we talk about it, we don't take it to a place where we get angry or upset. It's really information gathering. And why do you believe this? Or I had a good girlfriend after 2016 say, I really want to understand how and why you supported President Trump. And can we have a conversation about it? And I think that's healthy. I wish we had more of that on our TV and in our media. But I think that's the power of a grassroots campaign. And we've really adopted what Obama did. Obama set the model for that with his community organizing and the way he did his 2012 campaign. And the RNCs adopted that. And that's part of the reason we were so successful in 2016 and understanding those power of relationships and utilizing that.
I would love to go back to some more viewer questions. And we got a lot about the coronavirus pandemic, the economic fallout, the fallout for workers, the fallout for children, just about everybody. Rye in Houston, Texas asked, coronavirus-related economic upheaval has rippled across female workers, particularly low-income women and women of color. What policies is the GOP considering to assist these women now and to prevent financial trauma to them in the future?
Well, you've already seen the CARES Act, which has given money directly to a swath of Americans that needed aid during this difficult time. And that was done in a bipartisan way, which is great because we're in a time of crisis. And then you've seen the PPP program, which has put out tons of loans, many to small businesses. In fact, the majority of those loans have gone to small businesses. Women are a huge engine of creating small businesses. We just are. So that's been a big help to give them a lifeline to keep their businesses solvent during this difficult time. I think going forward, we have to start opening up this economy. We have to do it in a healthy way. We have to do it in a safe way. That's going to be the best case scenario for women across this country who need to work. And then we have to find a way to talk about the childcare issues for women who are at risk. So like DC, for example, where the RNC's headquartered, they just allowed a whole swath of essential businesses to open, but childcare wasn't one of them. And so as women, we have to start talking about that because like I know my husband's talking about that with his company. They've got women who can't come back, who have young kids who are out of school. I mean, this is a real challenge and there's a ripple effect on especially single mothers. So I don't have all the answers. I'm not a policymaker, but I think it's an important part of the discussion that needs to be had with Republicans and Democrats right now.
Several viewers actually, and probably more since I even looked at the list, were wondering whether, obviously there's an additional aid package pending in Congress right now. It's kind of come to a standstill. We don't know whether the Senate is going to take it up or in what form or when. Do you worry as a party chair, the viewers were saying, things are not back to normal for us. We need more help. Do you think that could hurt candidates if Congress doesn't pursue another aid package in this kind of economic upheaval?
Yeah, I expect that they will pursue. I don't know if it's going to be the $3 trillion that Nancy Pelosi's put forward. I think there's a lot of aspects of that Republicans won't support. I do agree that we have to find a way to bridge the gap. And I think Republican leaders are going to look at that, and it's got to be bipartisan. I know one of the things that Leader McCarthy and Senate Majority Leader McConnell have said is they want to pull out some of the liability aspects, so employers that do open up aren't going to be sued and deal with all this tort reform, all these tort issues that, even if they're abiding by the PPE guidelines and the social distancing, we don't want the potential lawsuits to be a preventative action or a preventative future action that causes companies not to open up, and we have to address that. So there's a lot there. I expect that there'll be something.
I loved that you brought up childcare. I wrote a story about that this week and got hundreds of responses from parents who are just beside themselves. Because here in DC, for example, we already have the school districts talking about possibly only coming back for 1 or 2 in-person learning days in the fall. And that's not even addressing all the daycares that are still closed right now. The industry groups are predicting that a third of, or as many as a half of all childcare facilities may not reopen after this. They've really struggled to get those small business loans. They were operating with small margins to begin with. Do you see bipartisan room to work on the issue of childcare as it relates to the pandemic and kind of rethink how we approach that industry that's so crucial to keeping our economy open?
Again, I'm not a policymaker, so I'm going to speak as Ronna McDaniel, mom, dealing with this too. I'm working full time, so is my husband. I'm actually starting to travel again for my job. It's incredibly difficult to have my kids at home, and I have older kids. I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, but the schooling aspect of it, we've had PTA meetings in our district that have gone 7 hours on Zoom as we're trying to navigate this. It's been really hard for our school district. So first and foremost, my heart goes out to the teachers, and I really want to thank the teachers who are having their kids home and then having to provide lessons for my kids, because that's a real challenge I don't think is being addressed enough personally, the burden that's causing on the teachers as well, having that. And then secondly, it is really hard to, and my husband and I have enough computers and we have the equipment, but to get the kids on the computer and do the Zoom meetings and then do the homework, and kids are handling this differently. My 15-year-old, this has been much harder on than my 17-year-old. The lack of social interaction. There's so many components of this. We have to start having a dialogue about this, about across party lines, because if it does go into November, which we're seeing California schools, I think the colleges have said they might not even come back in November. There's so much about this. This is the one thing personally, I'm passionate about this. I would like to see more of a dialogue on the schooling issue. I want schools to go back, but my high school, our kids' high school is 3,000 kids. How are they going to social distance? They don't have the room. I was talking to my daughter's school counselor the other day. And then if you have younger kids, I can leave and my kids are fine, but if you have younger kids and you're working, what are you going to do? So there is a whole conversation that I don't think has even begun. And as a mom, dealing with this, it has been very stressful in our home. And I do think the moms, I love the dads, but I think the moms take more of this on than the dads. Candidly, my husband's great, but it's been a challenge.
It's been hard on everyone. And other people wanted to know, also related to the coronavirus, you have a convention coming up where normally thousands of people are in the same rooms. What are you taking as party chair to keep people safe when you gather in Charlotte in August? And will it look any differently this year than past conventions?
So there's a couple things. One is our bylaws for the RNC. We have no option except to do an in-person convention. We just can't. We can't nominate. People think of a convention as a party. There's actually a lot of business that's taking place at a convention. First and foremost, the nominating process for the president and vice president. And the RNC, and I've looked at this many, many ways, we have no option other to do an in-person convention. So to conduct this. Secondly, we're planning full steam ahead because it's much harder to put a whole convention together with 50,000 people than to scale it back. So we're looking at the end of June, end of July. Let's see where we are in the phased opening. We love North Carolina. The mayor, Vi, has been phenomenal to work with. She's a Democrat. She's great, but it's about this great city that we want to showcase and having part of our democracy that's so critical. We've hired a safety expert, so we're now working to make sure that we are putting contingencies together that we can to put the safety of our convention goers first and foremost. But a lot of it's going to, frankly, come down to guidance from the governor and the mayor. I can make all the best plans in the world, but it's going to come back to these elected officials that are going to have to give us guidance as to what we can do. So right now we're full steam ahead. I'm planning on that, but there's a lot of factors out there that we're a little too early to make decisions on that. Let's see where Charlotte is more at the end of June.
Yeah. Speaking of elected officials at the state and local level, we got a lot of questions as well about voting in November and how to vote safely. There's been kind of a disconnect between the president and a lot of Republican Secretary of States about voting by mail. The RNC made the decision this week to intervene in a lawsuit in Florida that was trying to expand vote by mail. What was it about Florida? Why intervene in that case? And do you see other ways to vote by mail safely to keep people safe from the virus in November?
So there's a real nuanced discussion that's happening, and I think it's really important to understand the difference between an absentee ballot, which people turn in. States have put together guidelines for absentee voting for their military men and women, for people who are at risk, who can't come out and vote. And we want that to stay in place. We want the states to administer it. Where we're seeing that you're seeing the RNC intervene in many of these cases is where the Democrats have gone into states and sued not to remove safeguards like signature verification on absentee ballots, so you know that the person who sent the ballot in is the person who it was intended for, voter ID, expanding things like ballot harvesting in states that don't allow ballot harvesting, which I don't know how that has anything to do with coronavirus, having strangers go door to door and touch your hand and take ballots. I don't think that's something that should have anything to do with coronavirus. So that's the majority of the lawsuits were in our Democrats suing to expand ballot harvesting. And then the fourth is, and this is a real distinction, sending out absentee ballot request form is very different than just sending ballots. In Nevada, what the county clerk has done there is they're just sending ballots. No request, no person asking for it, a ballot. And what they found is they sent ballots to people who've moved away from the state. There's literally ballots littering the floor in apartment buildings and other things. So those are, of course, that's ripe for fraud. If there's 25 ballots sitting in a garbage can in an apartment building, which we have documented is the case. So many of these states haven't cleaned their voter rolls. So when people move away or pass away, so these are really common sense things that we're pushing for election integrity. I don't want to stop anybody from being able to vote that should vote. I want people to be able to vote safely, but I also want those assurances that we're keeping the safeguards in place for election integrity. We all should have confidence in our voting process. Think of the chaos that would bring in this country, especially with how divided we are. So those are the things where we're getting involved, and it's very nuanced. And by the way, we're not starting the lawsuits. Every lawsuit we're in has been started by Democrats going into states to remove these safeguards, and we're intervening.
So it sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of differences between what some of the states are doing. I know West Virginia has moved to expand. I don't know if they were sending absentee ballots or
yeah, that's the difference.
But
people say there's a real nuance in language because people say, oh, they sent the ballots, and then I'll go, well, did they send absentee request forms or actual ballots? Because that's a big difference. Just sending a ballot is like, I don't know, it'd be like me sending all these checks out and having them sit in the in the trash can for 25 different people who don't live there anymore. So there's a real nuanced difference. And I think it's important that Americans educate. What we're seeing is people really do like these safeguards, And we're getting involved, and it's different state by state based on the state's laws.
Well, one more question from a viewer, because we're already out of time. This went so fast. Jennifer in Austin, Texas wants to know, how do you think the GOP can better articulate the conservative principles it stands for? It feels like too often our message is just anti-Democrat. How do people know what the GOP believes in?
Yeah, I get that question. Thank you, Jennifer. I was born in Austin. I get that question a lot. It's hard because it's going to be to individual candidates to represent the party. We obviously have a president who represents our party. I am a Republican not because of what I'm against. I'm a Republican because of what I'm for. And I am for innovation, freedom, expanding the American dream for every single person in this country. And I believe you do that by cutting taxes, deregulation, rule of law justices. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but there are key principles as to why I'm a Republican. I want every Democrat to feel welcome in our party. We're Big Tent. If you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend. I mean, I want to expand that. Or if you don't like what you see in our party, help us make it better. That's how I feel. So I hope we'll do a better job articulating. I'll take that as a constructive criticism, and we'll work better to hopefully do better for you, Jennifer. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Chair McDaniel. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And now we'll go back to Emily. This is the second in a series of virtual events we're doing, and she will tell you about the next one coming up in a couple of weeks. Emily? While she's coming back on, we had a national listening tour that was supposed to be multiple cities. We have pivoted at the 19th to virtual events, and the next one coming up in a couple weeks is one that we're very excited about, and here Emily is.
Thank you for bringing me back. Sorry about that little technical glitch. Well, thank you both for this conversation. Thanks to everyone who tuned in, and thank you so much to Bumble, our sponsor, for making this event possible. I hope you'll join us for our next Live with the 19th with Democratic Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer on June 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central Time. Just a reminder to all of you that the 19th is a member-supported newsroom. If you enjoyed this programming today, we hope you'll subscribe to our free newsletter and consider becoming a founding member of the 19th at 19thnews.org. Thanks again, and we'll see you back here soon.